So I'm going to tell you what the best decks are in Hearthstone right now and give you a general overview of what they do so you can see if it fits your playstyle. And the first one is, no surprise, Quest Warrior. It is 2% higher than the next highest deck on this list, and I'm just going to be honest, sometimes stats don't tell the whole story because of a small sample size, but Quest Warrior is not the case. It is like the second most popular deck in the game behind maybe Mech Mage, and it's for good reason. It's broken. The general idea for this deck is you want to play tempo, you want to play fast, you want to have ways of generating more pirates with Amalgam of the Deep, the Harbor Scamp, as well as the 2 Dredge cards to make sure your next draw is a good pirate, especially one on curve. Then you finish your quest around turn 6 or 7. You want to play Rokara turn 7 and at the latest turn 8. And then you want that infinite value to carry you into the late game, as well as Mr. Smite and Nelly for potential burst. Basically, you got good tempo, which keeps you alive in the early and mid game, and then you have infinite value late game, and there's nothing anybody can really do about it unless it's a super hard aggro deck that can kill you before you finish your quest, but even that is rare. So the next deck on this list just happens to be the most popular deck in the game, Mech Mage, and it's on this list for a couple of reasons. One, it's insane resource generation. You got the Amalgam, you got Deep Run Engineer, you got the Sweeper, you got the Gorilla Bot, you have Kazakusan as well as Mothership. You just have endless resources the opponent cannot deal with. You have really good tempo and mana cheat with a lot of cheap minions and the Sleeve Floor Gateway. You got good late game with Gaia, and you also have a potential OTK with 2 Mecha Sharks. You basically play 2 Mecha Sharks and 5 other mechs, which is pretty easy to do, especially with mana cheat. And that's a 33 damage combo if your opponent has nothing else on the board. But even then, you've probably pinged them down a little bit, so you really only need about 15 to go face, and you can win through that. And then the Security Automaton, if you play this turn 2, you can snowball it pretty early, make it a like 5-7 by turn 4, and win the game through this. There's so many different ways you can win the game, so many different threats, your opponent just can't deal with them. And yeah, this deck is just a jack of all trades and a master of all trades, actually. So the next deck on this list was a little bit surprising, and it was Token Demon Hunter. Generally speaking, the idea of this deck is to play pure aggro, not even just tempo like Quest Warrior and Mech Mage do. This is pure aggro, which means you're playing a lot of 1s and 2s extremely fast, emptying out your hand really quickly and trying to finish off your opponent as quickly as possible, as opposed to tempo, which is playing your highest value minion every single turn basically and just outvaluing your opponent. Then you finish off your opponent over the top with things like Predation, a 5-2 weapon, and obviously Kurtrus, which makes your hero power now do 2 damage instead of 1 and be reactivated. And then you also have Need for Greed and Spectral Sight to refill your hand in times of need, which can be quite common in an aggro deck, which uses up all of their 1 and 2 costs by turn 4 or 5. So you just got good aggro, decent draw, and good direct damage at the end of the game to finish off your opponent. So the next deck on this list is Ramp Druid, which is a value/greed deck, whatever you want to call it. And the general idea of these kind of decks is you want to basically give up the early game and try to survive by whatever means necessary, while also drawing a ton of cards and ramping up. And then basically having an absolute killer late game with Scale of Onyxia, Miracle Growth, Naga Giant, which you can make multiple copies of with Oracle of Elune, Ibis, which can be a 33 Divine Shield taunt minion you can make copies of with Oracle of Elune, Kazakusan, which gives you the treasures at the end of the game. Everybody knows and hates Kazakusan. Not to mention the fact that you can make copies of some of these cards with Moonlight Guidance to snowball even harder. You just draw cards, ramp up, have an insane late game, and just hope you don't die early. So the next deck on this list is going to be another pure aggro deck like Token Demon Hunter, and it is Face Hunter. The idea is very similar to Token Demon Hunter. You want to flood the board early and basically just play everything you possibly can, and then you want to finish your opponent off with direct damage spells. In Demon Hunter, it was weapons and hitting them with your hero. In this case, it is direct damage spells and your hero power and double activating spells with things like the Twin Bow Terror Coil, which basically just allows your aim shot, if you combo it, to do about 10 damage with 1 card. So very effective deck, very fast. It can snowball extremely hard. A great combo is to play the Twin Bow Terror Coil and then playing the Naga's Pride and getting a whole board of Lionfish, or comboing it with aim shot, up to you. But yeah, basically just flood the board, face, and hopefully you win before turn 8, because if you don't, the opponent will just outvalue you. So the next deck on this list is very similar to Mech Mage, and this is Mech Paladin, and it is different in a couple of ways. One, you're not going to have as much mana cheat, and you don't have as much direct damage, so it is a little bit of a lower win rate, because if your board gets wiped, you will probably lose. because obviously Mage has Mecha Shark and Gaia, and they're ping for 1 damage if absolutely necessary. But this deck has bigger minions and ways of pumping their minions, which can snowball out of hand very quickly into some greedy matchups like Druid, and it might actually do better into some of those matchups. However, if you're playing against something like Control Warrior that can wipe your board very efficiently, this one is going to struggle a little bit more than Mage because it doesn't have ways of doing damage over the top. I will admit, against some combo decks and more aggressive decks, this will actually do better because you have Lightforged Cariel and some more Divine Shield taunt minions and just bigger minions that aggro decks can't really deal with. Overall, I like this deck a decent amount. I don't think it's as good as Mech Mage like I just said, but it's definitely a good deck to play if you still want to play mechs and just don't have some of the Mage cards. So the next deck on this list is going to be Pirate Rogue, and I actually really like Pirate Rogue. I think that it has some good tempo. It's got the potential for good late game with the Pirate Admiral, and I just like big, wild cards like Pirate Admiral Hooktusk because you steal 5 cards from your opponent's deck? Yes, please. You can steal a minion on your opponent's board. You can just yoink 2 cards out of their hand. It's so much fun to pull off, and you just run all pirates. You play tempo fairly aggressively. You have some cool combos with the Ashurian Vessel as well as Gone Fishing, which you can pull off on turn 6 to just get 4 3/3s out on the board. And it's a solid tempo-based deck with some cool late game. I don't think it's as good as some of the other tempo decks on this list, but it's still not bad. I would give it a chance. It's really fun to play. So these last 2 decks are honorable mentions that are kind of dark horses to finish top tier. And I will admit there are 2 decks on this list that I did not mention, and that is Blessed Priest and Quest Hunter. I think that they're good, but I think they're a little bit worse than the meta decks I talked about and not wacky enough to be considered honorable mentions or like dark horses. So the first one is going to be Nice Priest, which is ironic because it revolves around the selfish shellfish. It's kind of funny, I think, and it's nice because you're letting your opponent draw cards. Like, here, have some card draw. But that's the thing. You want to kill them with an OTK using Xyrella and having them draw a ton of cards all at once, or winning by playing the selfish shellfish, silencing it, and then killing your opponent with a ton of big 7/7s with things like the Undying Amulet, as well as the Ashurian Ritual in order to create more copies. It's really cool. You got great removal. You got silence from mechs. You've got good removal like the Whispers of the Deep and the Lightmaw Nether Drake for aggro. You got Shadowward Ruin and Xyrella to kill big minions like in Ramp Druid, and you've got some healing. You got basically everything. It turned out to be really good, and I went 6-0 with it the other day. So the last deck on this list is going to be Control Warrior, and the only question mark revolving around this deck is whether or not the fact that it has a good matchup against every single deck in the meta except Ramp Druid is enough to beat the raw power level of things like Quest Warrior, Token Demon Hunter, Mech Mage, and Mech Paladin. Like, is the fact that you have the best removal in the game and a ton of armor generation enough to beat an infinite value Quest Warrior, enough to beat a nearly infinite value Mech Mage, enough to beat giant mech minions out of Mech Paladin? And the answer is, I'm not sure. I went 5-1 with this deck. It's a small sample size, but it did very well. You have good late game value or mid game value with the Queen Ashura and Nelly. Late game with Kazakusan and Raid Boss. Great removal with Man the Cannons, the Brawl, the Rancor, 2 different Shield Slams, and the Onyxian Drake and Shield Slam. It's just, the question is, are the minions in the more aggressive tempo decks too strong? Only time will tell. I don't think so. I think this deck has the potential to be very good. And yeah, after it's optimized and people figure out what to do, it might be even better. So hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, feel free to like, comment, subscribe. Tell me if there are any decks that I missed that you'd like me to shout out next time. And as always, have a good one.